Namaste and good day to you. My name is Ram Jagesa. I'm here in Toronto, Canada. And with me is Dr. Naveen Chandra, also here in Toronto, Canada, who is a well-known scholar and, and commentator on Hinduism and Indian issues. We are continuing the discussion we started in part one. In part one of this video, we looked at some of the lies and ignorance of Kancha Ilaya, self-declared enemy of Hinduism. He is the man who seeks the total destruction of Hinduism, and he predicts that all Hindus will be converted to Christianity, Marxism, and Islam. However, we know that these three outside enemies of Hinduism have had their shot at destroying Hinduism and they have failed. Now you are saying, that Dr. Chandra, is that Hinduism also has enemies from within, and that these enemies are not so easy to spot as Christianity and Islam and Marxism, but they are probably more dangerous than the enemies from the outside. So who exactly are these enemies from within Hinduism? Could you give us an idea of some of the main ones?
Well, I looked into this matter for quite some time, and after having read books and then talked to people and having watched probably close to 1,000 videos, both in Telugu, Hindi, and in English from Indian sources, I came to a tentative conclusion. There are 5 groups that can be identified as injurious to Hinduism. And out of these 5, 4 are definitely outright enemies of Hinduism. So these 5 groups are within Hinduism, or within Hindus.
Or they appear to be within...
They are Hindus. They look. He could be your next door neighbor. He could be your bank manager. He could be your he or she could be your milkman. So anybody, they can be anybody. So let us just look at who are these 5 groups first. Let me first mention first one, the injurious one. I do not want to put it in the category of enemies, but injurious one is Dalits. Now, Dalits have a very strong case of having been denigrated, oppressed over the period of the time. But then there are exaggerations on their side when they say, no, this thing happened to them, but there are exaggerations, and we have to be very careful. We have to look at the issues without subjectivity, but with being very objective.
So let's make the Dalits are those whom we know as untouchables, right?
I don't want to use that word, untouchables.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but
what
some people know it as
some people, they call them untouchables. Actually, they were called panchamas, right? They were not within the 4 caste system, 4 varna system. So they were the panchamas, and Dalits have been wronged. Absolutely, we have to admit that. But then what is the solution? Are we going to sit down, Dalits, and then they mainly criticize Brahmins. So why don't Brahmins and Dalits sit down and iron out the problems?
Okay, let's so number one, the Dalits, however they were called Panchavas or Untouchables, underprivileged people and so on. That's number one.
That's number one.
Which is number 2?
The number 2 is our friends who I classified as Macaulay's children. Now, Macaulay's children is not really a new word. Apparently, I was looking at some of the Hindi videos over the weekend, last weekend, and the word has been in use for quite some time. Now, who are these Macaulay's children? You know who Macaulay was. Macaulay wanted a workforce for the British government with English values. And so what they did was, all right, they have a scheme. The scheme is you create a job and you give that job to a Hindu. Then that Hindu will work his ass off, so sorry to use that word. Then he will help the Raj, the British government, to continue in the country.
So if you have to categorize them, would the Macaulay's children be the ones who saying British good, Hinduism bad?
Exactly.
Okay, that's number two. And we will come back to to these. Third, number three would be.
Number three will be, they are in the same vein as Macaulay's children, but they are a little bit more enlightened in the sense that they dare to criticize British, but they still have the colonized mind. So colonized mind is again appreciation for the British, but in a deeper level, in a cultural level, in an intellectual level, and more in day-to-day social levels. You have these people who are colonized completely. That
They think the Western way is superior.
the best way.
We have nothing good about us.
We have nothing really. No, we may have some good things, but then they don't work anymore. That's what their idea.
So we have to learn from the outside.
We have to learn from outside, either in America or England or Germany or France or whoever, whatever country they want to follow. So these are the colonized mind. And then there were recently some discussions on how to decolonize the mind. Now colonized minds these are people very afraid to do things. They are scared, they are probably cowardly, they don't have any courage, they lost their self-esteem. So all these things, they go with the colonized mind.
So is it fair to say that the colonized minds are the people who see everything through the glasses of the colonized, of the British, French, Dutch and all of this, instead of using the Indian glasses to see, or the Hindu glasses to see Hinduism, they are looking at their thing through the eyes of the outsiders.
That's exactly. You see, they were educated to admire everything that is British, absolutely. Their literature is good, their administration is good, everything that is British is really good, and then we have really nothing to contribute to in our culture or in our literature or anything. We have very little.
But they don't necessarily say, as the Macaulay's children, British good, Hinduism bad. They just take the foreign lens and look at their thing. Okay, that's number three. What about number four?
Number four is the professors at the universities. These are left-wing professors. Now, you may ask me why there are so many left-wing professors in all the universities in India, in social sciences departments. Now, when Nehru took over, he was a Fabian socialist, you all know that. And then he also described himself as a Britisher. So he said he will be the last Britisher to rule India. So he encouraged the viewpoints of the West on our history, for example. That is really main point of contention is, one of the main points is of course Aryan invasion theory. So these points about Indian history, they were left to a group of left-wing professors who wrote textbooks, who taught them their ideas from the Marxist point of view for over 30 years until another thing happened when Marx took over completely the education department, the education sphere in India, and now we have You probably heard of a collector called Murali in Telangana. The way he talked, he's a typical product IAS officer, product of the Marxist anti-Hindu teaching, Hindu-phobic teachings, whatever, even vegetarianism is considered as bad by them.
So let me interrupt you there. By left wing, you mean Marxist, communists, right? Essentially, those who follow the Marxist, Leninist, Maoist view,
Stalinist,
Stalinist view,
and then Castroist, and then Che Guevaraist, and all these 5 or 6 Marxist leaders.
So they take the the left wing Marxist, communist, Maoist. They take that classes and they interpret India, Hinduism, and so on. Would it be correct to say that they generally take the view that the Marxist view that religion is the opium of the people and we should get rid of it, we don't need it, and so on?
Exactly. Now, not only that, but anybody who talks defending Hinduism or who talks about Vedas, they will be branded as saffron,
Backward,
superstitious, and then they will be made fun of. But then these people who defend Hinduism could not get into these positions because of Nehru and Indira Gandhi. Later on, Indira Gandhi made a devil's deal with the leftists, appointing them to high posts in the textbooks and then history writing and everything that was there. So these people even say to go to the extent of saying that India did not have a history before Ghazni came and attacked us.
Well, the critical thing about this is what example of success. If you're proposing something, you're criticizing something, this pants you have there, is a bad one. You should have an idea that look at this pants is a better pants. What is the success model that the left-wing professors are giving to the Indians and the Hindus that we should follow? Do they have any?
From my point of view, since I disagree with them 100%, they have nothing to offer to education system of India, and they should be really packed. They should be removed from the jobs, and then they should have enough number of people who support Hinduism in these universities. I was talking to several intellectuals who support Hinduism and Hindu thought and Hindu history. They can't get jobs. Even if they get jobs, they are made fun of in the universities. And then you saw what really happened in JNU 2 years ago when they were saying Barbadi to India and all those slogans. They got these slogans from these professors.
Okay, so that's number 4.
Number 4.
What's the last one? 5.
Well, the last one really is the media people and the social media people. Now the media, the mainstream media, the English speaking, English writing media, like the print media or the
television,
radio, or even sometimes movies.
Social
See, they're all Hindu phobic. They cannot say something nice about Hinduism. They cannot say something truth about Hinduism. They think that Vedas are all full of superstitions. They have not read anything. They don't even know Sanskrit. What they do is they read some English translations done by a Christian with his Christian lens. So they don't really get the right information about Vedas. And the same thing about Mahabharata or Ramayana. They have not really taken the trouble to read these books in depth in Sanskrit, original Sanskrit. Or, for example, there are a lot of books in Telugu, the classic books. to read those books in that language and then try to understand them. They do not do that. They do not make any effort because they think that to learn Telugu is really uncivilized, and it is totally cultureless. It is not. There is no culture. But the English is really the way to go. English is full of culture and full of civilization.
So would an example of these media and social media be the Hindu newspaper, which is anti-Hindu?
Hindu newspaper is actually a misnomer. The way they did last 2 months, they published an article by Tony somebody, I don't remember his last name right now. He was the editor of the Business World, and he was portrayed as a scientist, and then he wrote an essay on DNA, was full of holes. It was completely wrong. It was proved wrong. And then he came back to write another article in rebuttal to the person who was writing. And this Hindu newspaper has no professional ethics. They have no morality at all by publishing a rebuttal to Tony's article, and then not allowing the other person to write again. And the other person is more scholarly, and he was a scientist. He is a scientist.
So they do their thing, and they don't let you reply if
Actually,
you don't support them.
And then the Hindu magazine, the Hindu newspaper, they said, we use our editorial prerogative to stop anybody from writing, or to not to let a rebuttal being voiced. For example, an example is they criticized a scholar called Rajiv Malhotra, and then when Rajiv Malhotra wanted to respond, they would not give them a chance to respond. So it is like something like scroll, the blocks scroll or the wire.
It's a form of censorship.
They're a form of censorship, and also just shutting out the opponents. So that they think that they can get across their opinions if you shut out the opponents. But that is not what is democracy about, is it? These left-wing characters who talk about so much about democracy, they don't practice democracy at all. They are really like Stalin. They are working under Stalin. So Stalin says, "No, publish this, don't publish that." Therefore, these people, they have a coterie of they just have a group of these people who have very similar ideas, and then they won't let anybody against them speak up or write. They publish, and then the excuse they give is editorial prerogative. That is the word that was used by the Hindu editor a few months back.
No balance view. So let's look at these 5. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to go through all of these 5 today. Can we take maybe the first 2, that is the Dalits and Macaulay's children, and have a go at them, and see if we can tell people who these 2 groups are, what they are saying, why it is we consider them to be enemies of Hinduism from within.
Right. We will try and see how it goes.
Okay, let's start off with the Dalits. And as in any discussion, you have to define what you're talking about. Who are these Dalits? How many of them, exist? Where they are? What are they saying? That is so nasty, so dangerous. What are they doing, and so on? What kind of support they have? Is it all the Dalits are saying these and doing these nasty things? So is it some of them? What kind of support they have, within the rest of India? So we can get an evaluation of who they are. So let's start with with the usual. Who are these Dalits, especially for people who may not know exactly what they are?
Okay.
What is Dalits? How many of them, etc., etc.
See, Wikipedia is not very clear on how the word dalits came about, or who used it first. But anyway, we can just say that Jyotirao Phule used the word dalits first. He lived in the 19th century, 1827 to 1890, and he was a Dalit himself, and he was very upset by the treatment given to these scheduled caste people by the Brahmins. And there is a background history for that too. But anyway, we'll just talk about that background history a little later on. The Dalits word was first used by Jyotirao Phule. It is a Sanskrit word meaning suppressed people, and it was used in Maharashtra first. That is, Jyotirao Phule was a Maharashtrian. And then in 1927, Bhimrao Ambedkar adopted the word Dalits to describe these oppressed people.
So they are not an ancient group, but they are relatively modern group. Wouldn't that be fair?
Well, you see, the word Dalits is not found in Vedas, it is not found in Upanishads, it is not found in Gita, it is not found in Mahabharata, it is not found in Ramayana, it is not found in any of the 18 Puranas.
No, the people who claim it to be Dalits or who are being defined as Dalits, are these an ancient people going back 5,000 years and so on, or are these people a relatively recent development? I mean, within the last few hundred years.
Well, see, the Dalits claim that they were there right from the beginning, but they don't provide any proof
There's
for
no
that.
evidence of that.
There's no proof for that. But anyhow, British did use the word Dalits. We have to accept that word. And then British helped Dalits defeat Peshwas in Maharashtra. And so there is that problem, that background problem I was talking about, where Dalits helped the British defeat Peshwas who were fighting the British. So it is kind of, was it really patriotic to help British against your own people? But then they hated the Peshwas so much, so they just went and helped British.
No, we're getting away from the definition of Dalits. Now, every society has a number of people who are underprivileged, who are, who are poor, who are unfortunate, and so on. And India must have had some of them even in the old days, very few in the old days from what I understand. So, I mean, if I'm putting to you that there was a small group of underprivileged or dispossessed and vulnerable people doing dirty jobs and so on in the old days, but that because of the Muslim invasion, because of the British, damaging the society, that the number of these people has grown, especially in the last few hundred years, so that now they may be a much larger number than they were, say, in the days of the Mahabharata or the Ramayana. That's why they don't mention them in that time. And these are...
there are 2 points I would like to make here. In 6th century, the population of India was only about 50 million.
Mm-hmm.
And now, you talk about the numbers. There are close to 150 million, up to 200 million scheduled castes. And then the other part we will talk about it later on. Now, there are 200 million Dalits right now in India, are the scheduled caste part of the Dalits. There are 100 million more for scheduled tribes. That will make it 300 million.
Hill tribes, like our
so
natives.
If Brahmins killed these people, how would they be more than Brahmins? Right now, the population of Brahmins is much less than the population of the Dalits in India.
They claim Dalits, right?
They can claim Dalits. So the population is really important. They were not killed off. There were no massacres of Dalits anywhere, as far as I know, historically. they were suppressed. They were not given their rights. I admit, and it is really bad. Something has to be done about it. But to say that the compare the treatment given to them, to compare it with the four groups that we are talking about, who actually committed genocide. Brahmins never committed genocide.
So let me cut you there. Would it be fair to say that the Hindus, especially the Brahmins and the upper caste Hindus, that when they were in charge of India for how much thousands of years, that they did not create a large group of these underprivileged people, but that this group of underprivileged and dispossessed people grew mostly during the Muslim times, when the Muslims devastated and damaged much of India, and during the British times, when they underdeveloped and damaged India. So that if the Dalits are blaming the Hindus, right, upper caste Hindus in particular, for creating them and then discriminate against them, that they are off the mark.
Well, if you read the book The Case for India by Wilbrand, he clearly says that all Hindus were Shudras under British rule, and they were probably also Shudras under Muslim rule. There were few like Man Singh who got good jobs, but then by and large, Hindus were just the fourth rate or fifth rate people in both under Muslims and also under Christians. So to say that somehow this Dalit entirety was created by Hindus is totally wrong, as far as I am concerned, as far as my knowledge goes. See, the thing is, again, I am stressing the fact that we have to have a solution to these problems. The Dalits suffered quite a bit in history, but then to throw all the blame on Brahmins is totally wrong, in my view.
So let's go to what exactly are these Brahmins, all of them or some of them, saying and doing that is disruptive, to Hinduism or disruptive to the country India. Why do you regard some or all of them as enemies of internal enemies of Hinduism?
Before we answer that question, we have to look into the situation. Mr. Ambedkar used the word Dalits. We just heard and we just found out we just talked about it in 1927. Then in 1947, after India got independence, and then in 1950, when they framed the constitution, there was a special clause to help Dalits, both scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, in education, in jobs, in promotions, and in reservations, even for the constituencies of parliament members or member of legislative council or members of legislative assembly. And so they were taken care of.
That seems like a good thing.
That is a good thing. And they prospered. They prospered to that extent that 3 generations, say 1950 to 1991, they prospered. There were still some problems. But then in 1991, when the economy was opened up by a Brahmin, Mr. Narasimha Rao, the Prime Minister, the Dalits benefited quite a bit as a result of the economic reforms that were brought by a Brahmin, Mr. Narasimha Rao. Again, I have to repeat it so that people will really understand what really happened. The Dalits became millionaires. They became parliament members. Of course, they were parliament members before, and then they became ministers. And then they became landlords. They bought property, real estate, and they were renting their houses to the other people. So
How
It's
many
not
of-
exactly that people were completely, dalits were completely left out. They were within the mainstream as much as it could be done. They did it. And then another point we have to really be very careful here is the number of poor people that are in the mainstream population. You see, right now, let me just
Let me stop you there.
yeah.
Would it be correct to say that of the so-called 200 or 300 million who claim to be Dalits, that at least half of them are not poor, not oppressed, not underprivileged? Many of them are millionaires and billionaires and landlords and so on. So that technically, perhaps only half of them, I think you said, perhaps, even less than 100 million of them can claim to be poor and underprivileged. The rest of them over the last 60 something years or 50 something years have benefited substantially, and they have risen out of poverty, risen out of underprivilege. Would that be correct?
Of course, that is correct. And we have to admit this fact that the Dalits in 1950 economically is not the same Dalit in 2018. There are so many reforms that are brought in, both in law and also in economics and also in political spheres. That did benefit a lot.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If you look around the world, have any of the other societies that you know of, like America with the former slave population, like Australia with the Aborigines, many of these, these countries, in the Western Hemisphere, who have underprivileged people who were former natives and so on, does any of them have a program like India has for giving privileges and to the Dalits, to the scheduled caste?
I'm so thankful that you asked me this question. Because if you just look at the history of downtrodden people in South America, in North America, and in Europe,
Canada.
and of course Canada is North America, right? So North America. Now, you know what happened in Canada, now that you brought in this situation. They had this, the schools where they brought in, they took the children away from the families and they put in the Christian schools, taught them Christianity, taught them English, or enforcing, neglecting all their languages. And now, did this happen in India? 2 prime ministers of Canada, they apologized the inhuman treatment given to the Aboriginal people in this country over the period of 150-200 years. Now, the economic prospects for Dalits in India are great, the political prospects are great, and then the educational prospects are great. There are doctors, engineers right now among many families in Dalits do have these highly qualified people.
Let me come back to Canada.
Yes.
We don't have a system where member of parliament seats are reserved for First Nations people. We don't have a system where First Nations people are guaranteed scholarships to University of Toronto or any university. We don't have a situation where down the line, big parliament, councillors and so on, we don't have anything like that for our First Nations people, like what the scheduled caste have in India.
And the scheduled tribes.
And these people are still complaining.
Exactly. See, India stands alone in giving facilities, in providing facilities to its backward classes, are those who are left behind, and no other country can really claim to have done so much in so little time like India has done. So you cannot just blame everything on Hinduism. That is what people are doing right now, but that is not really correct. Why don't you examine the facts? Compare what other countries have done, even the mighty United States of America.
Black people don't have anything like this.
Black people don't have anything like that. You see, you become a great baseball player, that's fine, but that has nothing to do with the government helping them. You become a great basketball player, but that has nothing to do with the government helping them. But in India, government is there in and out, helping all these people as much as they can.
It's funded by taxpayers' money.
It's funded by taxpayers' money. But then we forgot about what really happened to the other people who are poor people in India. Others, not besides dalits.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we have a group of dalits, right? You say, under 100 million who are, who are genuinely poor and, who are underprivileged and so on. Are they the people who should be getting all the attention? Or are there other people in India who are equally poor and who are not getting these benefits?
Well, you see, you can look at the numbers. You don't really have to be an expert in population studies to look at. You got 1.3 billion people in India. Now, how many of them are really middle class? Middle class in the sense Canadian middle class, like have a car, have a house, and how many of them are there?
400 million?
No, there are 220 million cars. I checked it. There are 220 million cars.
Yeah, bicycles and so.
Okay, so there are probably some of them have more than one car, right? So then you have the motorbikes, and then you have got scooters. So let us say that there are 400 million people. It is very
reasonably well
off.
Right.
Really well off.
Right.
So you got 900 million left.
Not so well off.
Now 900 million. How many people really will be poor? The government statistics will be different, but then you can say that definitely there will be 4 to 500 million poor. So if 4 to 500 million people are poor, you just compare it to 100 million or 150 million to dalits.
They're five times as much.
There are almost 4 times, or even if you take 150 million poor dalits, there are 4 times other people who are poor than the dalits. So
and they're not getting anything.
They are not getting anything. So is it fair then? So dalits have to ask themselves this question. I know there were problems with dalits in the past, and we have to correct them.
We still have some problems.
Yeah, we will still have. But then there are others who are in greater numbers who are poor and who are getting nothing. Is that fair then?
Okay, so let's come back now. So is it fair for the dalits to be focusing on caste discrimination? They keep saying, from what I understand, that upper caste Hindu, that Brahmins are discriminated against them. They can't get good jobs. They're not allowed to go into temples. They're not, they're not getting education. They're not being uplifted. Blah blah blah. And they're saying all of this is because of caste discrimination from upper caste. Is it fair for them to be focusing on caste discrimination?
Well, in India there are laws. If there is a discrimination based on caste, then you can take the person who is doing the discrimination to court.
That's a crime.
That's a crime. And then if you are not allowed in a temple, you can take the temple authorities to the court. There are legal recourses for every citizen, not just for upper class. Now, when their rights are guaranteed under the Constitution, you see, we have only one document right now. I want to make it very clear to all the people who are watching this. We only have one document we follow today. That is the Indian Constitution. What does the Indian Constitution say about dalits? What were the new amendments? Even last month, after 2 months ago, there was an amendment to facilitate the rights of the dalits. So we only have one document. Nobody is following Vedas. Nobody is following Upanishads. Nobody is following any other document. Okay? Nobody is following Bhagavad Gita in the government. And there are people who read Bhagavad Gita. That's a different matter. But the government and the Supreme Court go only by the Constitution of India. And in the Constitution of India, all the rights of all the citizens are guaranteed. They absolutely, nobody can really find fault, because the Constitution was made by Mr. Ambedkar and Mr. Nehru. And so if Mr. Ambedkar and Mr. Nehru, when they made this Constitution, they could have abolished the caste system and then said, okay, we are going to give reservations only on the basis of poverty. And that would not have really eliminated the dalits, but that at least could have helped few others who are not dalits. But that didn't happen. So when you are really promoting Mr. Ambedkar as a great man and as the father of the Constitution, then he himself did not get rid of the caste. So the caste system created after 1950 was done by only two people. Again, I'm saying only two people, Mr. Nehru and Mr. Ambedkar. But it has nothing to do with Vedas, it has nothing to do with any older documents, it has nothing to do with Ramayana, Mahabharata, nothing at all. The modern society in India was created in 1950 under the Constituent Assembly, and then the two people who were mostly responsible for framing this Constitution were Mr. Ambedkar and Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru.
Well,
so you find fault with them. Don't find fault with Vedas. There is nothing to do with Vedas. The society that was created is the creation in 1950. It has nothing to do with what happened before.
Instead, so really, blame these guys. If the Constitution has these things and it's not being upheld, well, you take them to task. But these guys appear to be blaming private citizens, right, for this caste discrimination instead of taking action against actual cases of discrimination. Right? So why are they blaming Hindus for this, discrimination, which is essentially economic discrimination? Why are they blaming the Hindus? What do they want the Hindus to do? Let's move to the next point, in which you say that many of these critical, troublesome Dalits are saying that Hinduism itself is violent, is a violent religion, focused on violent religion, and Hinduism is based on oppression of poor people, oppression of women, oppression of minorities, and so on. They are saying these things. Is there a justification for that, for saying this about Hinduism?
As we saw, the population in 600 AD was around 50 or 60 million people. And now the population increased. The population increased in such a way that, again, I have to come back to this point. There are more Dalits, that is, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, there are 300 million, and there are more than Brahmins. If Brahmins killed them, Brahmins were violent, how come the number of Brahmins is smaller than the number of Dalits? Brahmins are not even in a position to be counted in the voting scenarios. They don't really count, they are not counted at all. Who are counted? People who are not Brahmins. All non-Brahmins are counted, are important because they are in greater numbers. And now the point is population-wise, just look at the population-wise. Now let us look at what Pakistan did, what Bangladesh did in population-wise. When in 1947, there were close to 16% of the population were Hindus in Pakistan, and 24% population were Hindus in Bangladesh. That is the East Pakistan before. Then today, what is the population of Hindus? 2% in Pakistan, and probably 3 or 4% in Bangladesh. So what happened to them? Either they were killed or they were converted. And now look at the record of Hindus in India. The population of Muslims was 8 to 9% this, in 1947, and right now their population is 14%. The population of Christians increased also.
Yes.
So how come the population of Hindus keeps decreasing if Hindus were violent?
Well, also, it appears that what they are doing is they are looking at the whole bulk of Hindu scriptures and so on. They find one little piece here that, say in the Mahabharata, it talks about war, right? And they say, see that? Hinduism is about war. But the Mahabharata, as you know, is not about, physical war. It's about good and evil, right? This is what they're saying, that you must fight evil. They may look at the Manusmriti and see one little, 2 or 3 little points which are critical of, of poorer people, of servants and so on. And they are not looking at the bulk of Hinduism. So what I'm trying to say is that when you look at Hinduism as a whole, right, the main thrust of Hinduism is not violence. Main thrust of Hindu is not oppression of people, right? We know what the main thrust of Hinduism is, but are they cherry picking little pieces of Hinduism that they don't like and categorizing all of Hinduism as this?
Well, I have to make one thing very clear here. Not all Dalits behave like this. There are Dalits who are integrated into Hindu society. There are lots of them. They are only very vocal minority. You see, the majority is always silent. The majority of the people of Dalits, I heard on the videos, both in Telugu and in Hindi and also in English, where they say they are sending priests to temples. Dalit priests are there working in temples. That's what I heard, certainly. So that problem is on the way to be solved. The Dalits are entering the temples, and moreover, how can a pujari who is in the temple know who is Dalit and who is not Dalit, and you just throw out Dalit from the temple? Has it ever happened? Can you show me one example where a Dalit was thrown out of a temple trying to enter? If you have not shown, then you have no case.
Well, I've been to India and we went in temple. The people looked at us, they didn't know we were from Canada, right? Looking at me, they can't tell if I am a Dalit or I'm a Brahmin or I'm a Kshatriya or I'm a person who who don't go by this caste thing at all. And so now we have established that the critical, troublesome Dalits are a very tiny portion of the whole scheduled caste group, that the majority of them are making progress, they're getting benefits and so on, and they seem to be quite happy with Hinduism. Right? They may want a few changes, everybody does, but they are not like these guys who are constantly attacking Hinduism.
But there is another point I want to mention. This happened only last month. In the Meerut district of Uttar Pradesh, there was a problem between two groups of Dalits. One group of Dalits was supporting BJP, and the other group of Dalits were supporting Bahujan Samaj Party, I think it's called. Now, the Dalits who were supporting BJP, they made an idol of Durga and they wanted to put in the temple. First it was agreed that they will reinstate after all these rituals.
Ceremonies.
I don't know all these rituals, but they put all the rituals, right? So they make a ceremony and then they agreed that they will put that statue in the temple. And then after they made it and they took the idol to the temple, they refused. The Dalits refused. So one group of Dalits refused the other group of Dalits to install a Durga idol in the temple. And now that was portrayed by the communist media, saying that Brahmins did it. No, they did it. So the lies and the fallacies and the falsification of the information that is so characteristic of the Marxists, Leninists, Stalinists, Maoists, Castroists, and Che Guevarists. They never tell the truth. They always lie. And so they took this problem that existed between two groups of Dalits, because one was supporting BJP, the other was supporting another party, and then this party, they refused the idol of the other group of Dalits. So the discrimination happened, one group of Dalits against the other group of Dalits. It's a political one. It has nothing to do with Vedas, nothing to do with Ramayana, Mahabharata. But then they will make it look like as though Brahmins did it. So that is the problem in India right now.
Okay, so let's go to another. We have so many. I've heard of the color question, that some of the Dalits, other people in some parts of India too, are saying that Hinduism favors light-colored people, right? People who are light-colored are favored, and people who are dark-colored, are kept down, right? Similar to what we have in America, the black-white, divide. Is there such a thing as a color question in Hinduism, or even a color question in India?
Well, the two most important deities, two of the three, right? We have Vishnu and Brahma and Shiva. Vishnu is black, and then Rama is black, Krishna is black.
The name Krishna means?
Krishna means, you know what Krishna really
dark.
means. He is the most loved God in Hinduism, and there are so many things written on him, so many poems, so many plays, so many books written on him. He is really so much closer to the hearts of Hindus. He is black, and Rama was black. And then in Mahabharata, there are 4 characters that are black. Vyasa himself was black. The person who wrote, he was called Krishna Dvaipayan. Krishna, he was also called Krishna because he was black. He was the son of Parashar and Satyavati, but then he was black. Then Arjun was black, Draupadi was black, and then Krishna was black. So there are 4 principal characters in Mahabharata were all black. None of them were white. And so what the movies did was, they showed Arjun as white and Draupadi as white, because they cannot sell their movies if they show them as black. So it has nothing to do with Hinduism, it has nothing to do with scriptures. You see, there was in Gita, if you just look at the shlokas, 200 out of 700 shlokas talk about equality. Everything has, every person is equal in the eyes of the God, or we don't really have a God, but in the eyes of Paramatman, and there is no discrimination based on the color. That is borne out more than once in both Ramayana and Mahabharata.
So isn't it true that modern DNA studies have shown that there is no DNA for dark-colored people that is different from DNA for light-colored people, and that there is no such thing as a Dravidian, right, by DNA, and that the DNA of the darker skinned Indians and Hindus is exactly the same as the DNA for the lighter skinned Hindus.
Yeah, most of the time, according to Mr. Subramanian Swami, the DNA of Dalits and Brahmins is the same.
It's the same.
And the DNA of Muslims, Christians, Macaulay's children, British lovers, American lovers, China lovers, they are all, the DNA of all of them is almost the same within certain limits. So, to say that the Hinduism discrimination based of color is just complete falsification of
Throw it out the window.
Yeah,
What about
throw it
this,
out the window.
this thing that Kanche Laya mentioned, and apparently some other Brahmins, other Dalits are urging Hindus, you should eat beef, right? And the vegetarian is inferior to to meat eating. Is this a serious thing? Are people seriously urging Hindus to eat beef?
They are showing that the Americans eat beef, English people eat beef, and then of course the Muslims eat beef, right? Muslims never had cattle in Arabia,
Yes.
but somehow they think that in Arabia they had a lot of cattle, and then we really miss the cattle meat in India.
They eat goats and camels.
So, and then of course in Europe and Americas, and in both South and North America, the cattle industry just came up only after the Second World War. They started eating a lot of beef only after Second World War. And when there was refrigeration was a problem, the storage of meat was a problem, and then all these problems were there. And then besides, there are other problems right now. What we are having is carbon problem in the environment, the methane problem in the environment. So if all 7 billion people on the surface of the earth were to eat 150 grams of meat every day, and somebody calculated in the UN, because they have nothing else to do but this, so they calculated and said that you need billions of cattle, and then in 30 years of time the population increases to 9 billion people of the world, and then they will need more billions of the cattle, and all these billions of cattle will release into the atmosphere so much of methane that the carbon balance will be completely upset.
But doesn't all the evidence for the last 100 years maybe show that vegetarians are generally healthier and longer living than meat eaters?
Yeah, even recent studies show that main think tank in London, Chatham House, they recently wrote an article, and then they keep writing articles saying that people should really should switch to vegetarianism. And even another magazine, Guardian, they wrote articles, and the United Nations released reports saying that it's about time we should cut down on eating meat. But then these people in India, these Marxists, they have no intention of following the modern science. They will just reject.
They say what they want.
They follow this reject, rebel, and there is another word I am trying to remember it now, but I can't remember it now. There are 3 words that are used by the modern Marxists. They used it.
Those two are enough: reject and rebel.
Yeah, reject and rebel. So that is their philosophy right now. So you look at their philosophy, that is postmodernism. What does postmodernism say? It says that you have to tell lies. You have to tell lies, more lies and more lies. So something like, I will give you an example, and this is, I'm giving an example as a joke. So somebody said, do you know what Abraham Lincoln said about internet? He said that you cannot trust everything that is on the internet. Now, that statement will be equivalent to what Marxists talk about serious things. We all know that Abraham Lincoln time there was no internet. So if you make a statement like that and then try to convince your listener that Abraham Lincoln did say that, that's what the Marxists do. They take a statement that is completely falsified, and with their wherewithal and their propaganda machine, they make lie look like truth. So that is what the problem is about the vegetarianism and beef eating.
Let's come to one of the big ones. I understand that some Dalits, I'm not saying all, but some Dalits are calling for a separate state in India, independent state to be called Dalistan. Is that correct?
Well, but Mr. Alaya wanted it. Mr. Alaya wants a Dalit Socialist Republic.
Which in India?
They want to carve in the Dandakaranya area. That is where they claim that Rama killed a lot of Rakshasas who were Dravidians and who were Dalits. This is all wrong. Because most of the Rakshasas were Brahmins, we know that. Ravana was Brahmin, Vrutrasura was a Brahmin, Mahishasura was a Brahmin, and then Narakasura was the son of Vishnu and Bhudevi. But then they say that all these people are Dalits. When did they become Dalits? When did they become Dravidians? There is absolutely no proof. They don't provide any proof.
No,
it is just like saying Abraham Lincoln and internet problem.
I'm talking about this. This is a serious matter. This is treason. This is sedition.
This is.
If we call for, well, many people in Quebec call for, for a separate state and an independent Quebec. Well, you know what happened here.
Exactly. Mr. Trudeau sent army to control the situation in Quebec City and in Montreal. And if in Canada that can happen, right? In a Christian country, which is supposed to be democratic, right? It's democratic. They sent army to Montreal in how many? 50 years ago? No, 1970, right? And now, did India do anything like that? Did India send army to the places where Dalits are these Marxists are making inroads into the society and then killing people on a daily basis?
Well, let's come to this.
So,
I understand that there are Dalit Marxists and Dalit Naxalites who are actually physically killing people. They are using the violence that they accuse Hinduism falsely. They falsely accuse Hinduism of being based on violence, but they are themselves using violence to try and get whatever they want, Dalit state or greater autonomy or greater power. And a fair amount of these Dalits, Naxalites and Dalit Marxist revolutionaries actually using violence, physical violence, in India.
Well, that is the whole problem, right? When you call somebody violent, but then you at the same time support 4 other systems that are violent. We already looked into this in part 1, right? How many hundreds of millions of people were killed by Christians? There were 400 million. And 300 million people were killed by the Islam, and 140 million people were killed by the Marxists, and then 35 million people in India alone were killed by the British. So these are millions of people, in genocide after genocide after genocide by these 4 groups. But then they look at Hinduism, where there is no record of any genocide, there is no record of any mass killing, there is no record of any mass killings at all in Hindu history, and you call Hindus are violent. That is again the same thing. If you repeat a lie 5 times, then they believe that it will become truth. That is the whole problem. You see, Marxists, they are striving to get elected, but they're saying that their system is better. We need Leninism. But then what happened to Leninism in USSR?
Where is Leninism that succeed?
Right. So they keep selling that idea, they're peddling that Marxist idea to India, and then they are never successful. They will never form a government. Where they formed government in West Bengal and in Kerala, the situations we know how the situation is.
So we seem to have established that a substantial part of the Dalits are moving up, they're not making trouble, that is a small section who are criticizing Hinduism, criticizing discrimination, calling for separate state, doing violence and so on. What support for their aims do these extreme Dalits, not talking about the good ones, what support do they have for their program and their policy in the whole of India itself and outside?
Well, outside we know that in the United States and in Canada there are Dalit associations.
Dalit Freedom Network.
Dalit Freedom Networks. They peddle the same lies. They do not stop at telling a lie and then make the lie look like a truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hinduism is this, Hinduism is that, but then there is no proof of any of that. You see, the other day I was reading an article by one of these professors, Dalit professors at one of the universities. She wrote that the same color problem. Hindus like white people and they don't like black people. That is why they oppress Dalits, because Dalits are black. But then you see, I wrote her back saying that Rama is black, our God, and Krishna, God, is also black. So how can you say that we don't like black? But then there is no reply. You see, when you really pin them down,
They run.
they run. So majority of the Dalits are law-abiding. They are achieving some objectives in their lives, and they are progressing. There is a small vocal minority that keeps on doing this, encouraged mostly by the Marxists.
And what does the rest of India, who are non-Dalits, what do they feel about these troublemaking Dalits, these enemies of Hinduism, these...
Well, you see, UP, Uttar Pradesh has a lot of Dalits, Bengal has a lot of Dalits, West Bengal, and Tamil Nadu has, and then Gujarat, and these are the four provinces where
Yes.
there are almost 50 or 60% of the Dalits in India reside. In some provinces there are more, in some provinces there are less, in some states there are less, and so there are more. And so, the fortunes of these minority Dalits who are in the states, they follow this Marxist philosophy of, rebel, reject, rebel, and what is the last word? I don't remember. There was also stuff with R. It is called the mantra of the modern postmodernism. Right? You tell a lie 3,000 times, it becomes truth. So that is what these the Dalits in United States and Canada and other places are doing. And
I give it reject, rebel, and rubbish, right?
probably rubbish, yeah, that's what it is.
So I'm getting the impression that you feel that these extreme Dalits, troublesome ones, enemies of Hinduism, right? People who want to destabilize and break up India, that they're not given a model of success that people can look at, and that they don't seem to have a lot of chances. The odds of them getting what they want don't seem to be very good.
People in India will not support this. See, if the things really come to a boiling point, even majority with Dalits will not support this idea. But then this vocal minority is there, right? They are a pest.
They keep stirring it up.
Yeah, they keep stirring the pot. Instead of really trying to find a reconciliation, truth and reconciliation. Okay, now if there were injustices done to the Dalits in the past, 200 years, then we should sit down and then solve this problem and forget about it now. So what is the point of pulling your victim card every time as though it is like a getting out of jail card?
Yes.
But that is not the way to do it.
Isn't it time to get rid of this 1950 constitutional amendment that gives special privileges, to the scheduled caste and and the other caste?
I am all for abolition of the caste system in India. Abolish caste system completely.
Apparently that has been
Yeah,
done.
so what we should really do is this. Your caste and your religion is within your walls. Once you leave your door, On the street, no religion and no caste.
No, I'm talking about
Yeah.
about the privileged MPs, education, and so.
Well, that has they have to go also.
Is it time to get rid of that?
Yes, it is time to get rid of it, and let us all work for a casteless society in India, and let us do it with sincerity and with truth, okay, and with non-violence, which is the Hindu principles. Truth and non-violence are Hindu principles.
How about expanding the system to include all the other Indians in India who are underprivileged and poor, but look at them not on the question of the scheduled caste, but look on the question of poverty and underprivilege and lack of education.
Exactly, we just found
Economic
out.
factors.
We just found out there are close to 4 to 500 million poor people outside Dalit sphere. Dalits are only 100 or 150 million. So the number of people who are poor in India outside Dalits is much more, 3 times more than Dalits themselves. Now Dalits have had their share of largesse in the last 70 years, and it is about time we should get rid of caste system, and then we go from there, and then we sit down and argue and debate and then solve all these problems once and for all, instead of you always, as I said, taking out your victim card. It is like getting out of the jail card. You stop doing this.
You can't play that indefinitely.
Yeah, you can't go on playing that card, definitely.
Okay, Naveen ji, it's been almost an hour. I don't think we will have time to get to Macaulay's children. So that may be part 3, in which we take a hard look at Macaulay's children and perhaps, 1 or 2 of the other groups that we've mentioned, the left wing and the media and the social media. And I want to thank our listeners who will be looking at this and encourage them to send in your views, give your opinion. This is what it's all about. That's the only way we could come to a resolution of these and other similar issues. Thank you again.